sent me the prints, and then now you have to send me the other copies.
Okay, so you don't have any copies on you. Is that what you're
Not
saying?
anymore. No.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
It would be useful if I did. We're off to a great start here, everyone.
It would actually be useful if I knew you didn't have it too. I'll get you your I know I have to send you 40 copies. It's just I want to send them safely, and I usually try to do it in person, but it's all good.
Yeah.
Okay, people. Hello, everybody. How's it going, y'all? Hey, David Solo. What's up, man? I haven't seen some of these faces in a while. Jody, what's going on from Tacoma? Yeah. All right.
Good evening, Kris.
Thank you.
I came prepared this time.
Oh yeah, I got the beer. Hopefully it lasts for the 45 minutes. It definitely will not. Got Isaac from Atlanta. You got Jody from Tacoma, David in New York. Where's everybody else from tonight? So thanks for being here with us on the Blue Sky calls, or the WKGP as we are calling them. Hopefully I don't go in and out. I hope that the internet is strong enough outside tonight. I'm in my friend's backyard in Williamsburg because of another friend of ours is visiting from DC, so I had to come bike down here to see him for a little bit, since I haven't seen him in about since this whole thing started, the COVIZ as I call it. But tonight, thanks for being here. We're going to be talking to Hannah Altman. Sorry. I mean, I like Hannah too, though. I think both are.
I mean, it's like the way you say happen is like Hannah, but it really depends where you're from. Like if you're from like Long Island or New Jersey, you tend to say Hannah, and if you're from like the South, you tend to say Hannah. So it's both fine.
I get that. I'm from both New York City and Long Island, so I'm gonna go ahead and say Hannah, just because you got to get that A in there. That's just like Hannah, like the. Anyway, sorry. So thanks for being here with us. And I would ask, right away, I'm just going to ask, like, if you have questions, you can either, put them in the chat for now, and then about 20 minutes into the conversation, after I ask a bunch of my questions and we go through the book a little bit, we'll talk about, and ask whatever you want. Hannah will answer whatever you want to ask her. So we'll see. Let's get personal, and and for now, please turn off your screen so that we can keep the Wi-Fi connection going well. If you can hear me well now, we're good, but we're just going to turn off the screens and muted microphones just for a moment, and then we'll get back to seeing everybody in about 25 minutes. And thank you very much. I'm not going to actually share a screen at all. We'll just go through the book in person, because I think I can hold it, and I think I have enough light on it.
Yeah.
I think it shows up pretty decently with my little my strobe situation here. But Hannah, how's it going? What is this year for you? You kind of started this year in grad school, right?
Yeah, I can't believe that January is the same year as where we are now, because I actually had a solo exhibition of this work before the book at Blue Sky, thinking that was going to be like the or like the first iteration of this work, which would eventually be my MFA thesis show, which obviously did not happen in this spring. So I'm so glad I got to have this show and have it in like exhibition form in January, because that's the last time I've physically shown work.
And is that the last time you actually were able to, well, I guess you were traveling a bit, like moving around, but was that the last kind of, I would consider Portland a vacation because I love Portland.
Yeah.
I hope that you considered it the same. I mean, thank you for doing a show at Blue Sky. I was unfortunately not able to see it, but I heard that it was so beautiful, and I saw the pictures, and I'm so glad that you got to show out there, and I'm glad that we worked together on a book after that. So, but anyway, what has happened to you since the pandemic started, pretty much, is what I wanted to ask first.
So many things. And also, to answer your other question, it wasn't the last thing I did. The last thing I did was like the week everything stopped. Like I think it was like the day the NBA canceled itself. That was like the day everyone was like, oh no, this is like probably real. In my opinion, at least. I had just gotten off a plane because I spoke at SB National So I was in Houston, Texas, and the day before I flew back, I went to the rodeo because the rodeo was there, and it was like 50,000 people in this arena, like watching animal cruelty. Honestly, it made me very uncomfortable, but it was really fun. And it was such a large gathering. And then I flew back, and then turned on the news, and that was like kind of the exact day that everything stopped. School was like canceled that week because I was initially on my spring break for grad school. And then I had to finish everything out remotely for the rest of grad school. So I defended my thesis in my pajamas in my parents' house. I moved out of Richmond, where I was going to school at VCU. Didn't have
Virginia
a thesis
Commonwealth University, by the way. So if you didn't know what
Yes.
VCU meant.
Yes, Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. It's a great program. Highly recommend.
Yeah.
But yeah, it all just like stopped, and we even got locked out of our art studios from March to June. So all of my art was there, and when I went back in, it was like a time capsule of shows that I thought were going to happen. Like everything was like separated into different shows because I was supposed to be doing something in Pittsburgh as well. And I just packed it all up, did very poorly too, because I was just like, I'm not going to be using this for a while. I can't be bothered to like pack these carefully at the moment. And then now I was living with my parents for a while, which is fine. They're in New Jersey. I love them. Nice people. I got to redo my childhood bedroom. And my friend from grad school happened to mention that her grandfather owns a cottage in a small town in Rhode Island right on the beach. And they were looking for a tenant to keep up the plants and like keep up with the heat of the house. It's like a manually heated house. And I was so bored at that point that I said yes. And now I'm living in a cottage in Rhode Island. And now I'm like refurbishing this barn in my studio. So I've been all over the place.
All across the Eastern Seaboard and a little bit of Portland this year. Show us your studio. Is this like where you're putting up your work in the space now?
Yeah. And I put up, I know if the internet cuts out, I apologize, but you don't
really have to move around too much, but like, oh yeah, that's nice. I like that. I like the kind of moving with your face in the middle of the camera. Okay, cool. You got your show. You see, you have your show up. It's perfect.
Yeah. So, no, it's really nice. Like, there we go.
Okay. I'm sorry I made you move because. Yeah, well, you're good now. The moving part was not the best, but like, okay, we're back to normal.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with yourself these days? You're now settled in your space. You're working on your art, but like, how do you make a living? Like, what are you doing to like survive?
I am a content producer for the Jewish Alliance of Rhode Island. So doing photography and writing and stuff, and some of their social media as well. And that's very new. Sorry, what?
No, I said cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's the first time I have health insurance as an adult, so I'm pretty pumped about that. But I'm also adjuncting at VCU and teaching some classes and stuff. So it's nice. I'm doing a bunch of things. And I think it's a really good post-grad school move because grad school was so stressful and had such a crazy end that now that I'm here in this like silence by the beach and have a job, but it's not like a crazy stressful job, but it's still productive and relates to my practice. Like it all feels good.
And how close are you to the beach? I'm maybe very jealous when you tell me the
steps.
Steps? Oh my gosh.
Like 7. Yeah. Like I think we're the third house, like the beach, and then 2 or 3 houses than us.
That sounds very nice.
So
that sounds
it's very nice.
So okay, so we're gonna go through. I'm gonna hold up your book. Hannah and I collaborated on this book of her project. I mean, I didn't do anything besides put it together into this printed form, but this is called Kavana. And if you would explain it while I kind of walk through the book, please just explain your project to us.
Yeah. So Kavana, which was my thesis project for graduate school, but kind of started before that and also is kind of continuing after that. But this iteration of the book is primarily a project that explores Jewish action and its relationship to ritual and object and collective memory. The images kind of shape themselves around ideas of Jewish ritual in varying ways and of Judaic objects. And they use those things as a vehicle for photographic storytelling and how that relates to memory. So every image here, it utilizes some sort of Jewish folktale or philosophy or action or object, and combines those things with more kind of formal narrative photographic language. So it kind of creates this work that considers the place of memory in both photographic storytelling, but also in Jewish ritualistic action. So it tends to exist in and kind of explore this space of what ideas are passed down to us and how we engage with what is passed down to us. And it started as an interest in, moving to Richmond, I guess, was a huge catalyst for this project, because I grew up in New Jersey, and I was always very versed in some sort of Jewish community, or there was always other people around. And then I moved to Richmond, which it's a very different situation.
What does that mean? How was it different? What was it different?
There is a Jewish population there. And I don't want to discount it, because they really, especially the Chabad Hillel at VCU, is super. Oh, it says my internet connection is on.
Yeah, it's a little bit slow, but it's fine. Just keep going. Don't worry about it.
Sorry, I'm in. So they have a Jewish community there, but it's very much, you're either entirely observant or you're not, and it's very Ashkenazi centric, meaning just Eastern European / Middle Eastern, as opposed to Sephardic or Mizrahi, which is Middle Eastern or Spanish. And it was just kind of not what I was used to, and I was noticing a lot of absences, and it was really going against the grain of where my interests were starting to lead. Because even larger than a sense of community, I was getting really interested in Jewish ideas, how rituals were approached, how they relate to collective memory, how the same ritual can be interpreted by different denominations or by different individuals and kind of get to different conclusions from the same root, all became very, very interesting to me. And I think, as this project expanded, I started to travel a lot and leave Richmond. And I think that was really important to the project. Because I think in its early stages, I was mostly just pissed that I had chosen grad school in the South when I was working on this project, and it didn't seem beneficial at first. But now I have totally reversed my opinion on that, because it being there forced me to leave and find other people who were engaging Judaism in very different ways and place them inside of the same project, and place them in conversation because of that, all over the country. And I think that sort of made place irrelevant in a really interesting way. Throughout the project, like instead of focusing so much on who specifically I'm photographing or where specifically it is, it kind of like removes it from a set timeline, and puts it more into this like mystical kind of detachment from a time or place.
And where were you making these photographs? Were these in Richmond, or were they in Jersey, where you were from, or like where were they made?
Everywhere. They're truly everywhere from New Jersey to, because a lot of the self-portraits were made in Richmond. That apartment had really beautiful light. Some were in Jersey, especially. There's my mom. I think she's only in that book once. My mom's in a lot of my other projects pretty heavily, and but I think in this book she's only there once. But also just but also random places in Florida. I would drive. If I had met someone or I heard of someone that I thought had really interesting ideas of engaging Jewishness, and they lived 7 hours away, I would go down and drive to them and photograph them and then drive back up for crit the next week or next day sometimes. It was fun. It's very much a privilege to be in grad school and be in that bubble of not focusing on anything but making work and being able to dedicate entire days at a time to traveling to meet people. And it's something I would like to continue. Obviously, COVID has put a bit of a wrench in that plan, but it's everywhere. And I kind of like that it's everywhere, because while there are specific qualities of light throughout this project, some locations geographically naturally have that quality of light, and some are a little bit more orchestrated in order to make that thread go all the way through.
Hmm. So it's a little bit of found scenes as well as like kind of constructed realities.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's most of how I make work anyway, is that you can a lot of it relies on the heavy research beforehand, but isn't necessarily connected to a singular photograph or doesn't end up connected to a singular photograph. But more so becomes the framework or the backing idea of how they eventually came to be. So it's a little bit of planning, and then once the actual image making starts, once you actually meet up with these people, or go home to photograph, you just kind of let the magic of photo happen. So it's a little bit of that balance.
Cool. And so this is a project that is, I'm guessing it's kind of complete because we made this book, but you're also working on some other stuff, which is really beautiful and maybe semi-similar, but most a lot dealing with your mother, and that's called Indoor Spaces. Is that
Indoor
what that's called?
voices, yeah.
Indoor Voices. And would you just explain a little bit of that project while I showed like the last few pictures from this book?
Yeah, because
That's in
so
it.
because they're definitely connected, and I think so. Indoor Voices is a portrait series with my mother that's been going on for, I think it's in its sixth year, and
Huh.
it's a very slow burn project. So it's something we make a few of these images a year. They're very staged, but they are staged very much in the way that femininity is staged. There's things that are very arranged. It's very I don't want to say poise, but I guess poise is the word I'm using. There's this kind of like veil of control throughout this project that I think talks about womanhood a lot, especially between mother and daughter. There's these kinds of, balances of power. And making those images for a long time kind of was actually really the seedling of this project, because it started to tie into each other, because one of the images that we had made in 2017, when her mother, was dying of cancer. When she was in hospice care in the house that she currently lived in the house that my mother grew up in, we made an image during that time. And then we stayed and started going through all of my grandma's stuff. And there was a ton of Judaica in there and a ton of notes and a ton of what ended up being a lot of research for Kavana, for the next project. So they definitely
Gotcha.
bleed into each other. And it comes from a place of, family intimacy. But I also think once you're in a community of an ethno-religion like Judaism, choosing that like familial intimacy with anyone you meet within that group, it just starts to make sense photographically.
Gotcha. And we have a few questions coming in, and I wanted to just go to them because they're good questions. I want to hear the answer.
Okay.
David asked, when you work with the subjects, what was the process for the staging? Did you direct, or was it more collaborative process?
Mm-hmm. It's definitely, in terms of compositionally and on a technical note, that's entirely at my discretion. I mostly use natural light, but I use a lot of like tricks and stuff like tinfoils. Oh, I have tinfoil in so many photos. That's really the secret that I'm giving away. Is that
Yeah, that's good.
it's the cheapest. I tell my students this honestly all the time because it's really cheap. You can fold it up, you can change the shape, you can do whatever you want with it, and it really helps you reflect light. But window light is always really important. So if I am shooting indoors, which I often am with other people, there's something very intimate about window light. It immediately transforms it into a portrait of someone to a portrait that is inside of a space that has a relationship to the participants.
Yeah.
But it's collaborative in that some of the people that I am traveling to meet for the first time, I'll talk to them for several hours before the camera even comes out, or sometimes even like several days. I'll go back with them and hang out with them, and then kind of figure out what photo works best.
Gotcha. And yeah, the tinfoil trick, you're giving out the secrets. I dig it. Another question we had was, do you think, or from Lauren in New York, what up, Lauren? Do you think light has spiritual qualities?
Yes, yes, yes. Because it's, oh my gosh. I mean, especially, I don't know if there's anyone that's in this chat that's Jewish, but light is like a central component of Jewish spirituality. It's a lunar calendar, so it very much relies on sunlight. And there's this amazing book that even if you're not Jewish or religious, it's an amazing book. It's called The Sabbath. It's by this rabbi, Abraham Heschel, and he talks about how light is the signifier of whether or not things are mundane or if they're sacred. And specifically, he's talking about Shabbat. He's talking about when the sun sets on a Friday night at a certain time, time is no longer just time as we experience it every other 24 hours, 6 days a week. It becomes this separate, sacred thing that only is enacted by lighting a Shabbat candle. So but it's also amazing because it's like this intangible thing that has a relationship to photography already. So it's definitely very much a part of the way that I think Jewish ritual and photography can have like ways of connection with each other.
Ah, wow. And the questions they keep coming in. David also asks, can you talk about the cover image, which is so unforgettable? And I agree. It is definitely something that I've probably not seen in photography before, and it's quite beautiful. So like, what am I seeing here?
That's funny that this question came right after, because those are Shabbat candles. So it is talking about those ideas of things that are sacred versus things that are mundane, and having the difference be the intentionality. You know, and having this sort of patience of it melting over your hands and allowing yourself to sort of become patient with this action. And that's kind of like, so there's two parts of Jewish ritual, and there's kiva and there's kavana. And kiva is the physical parts of it. It's we do this at this time, and we use this object to do it. We say these words. It's the very, you know, cut and dry. But kavana is more so the intentionality behind the actions you're doing. You know, it's the feeling. It's the more intangible thing. You know, you can light the same candles every Friday, but unless you're putting the intentionality behind it to make that time sacred time, or to make this image a sacred image, then, you know, it doesn't automatically exist within a ritual. You have to set that intentionality. So that image talks about a lot of those things too.
I wanted to bring it back because I actually don't know these things. I mean, what you're telling me now is things that I need to know as the publisher, because we haven't really, because this year's been so crazy, we haven't been able to have a physical interaction at all, which like at this point we would have already gone to like 4 or 5 book fairs together and like really shown this book to the world in a way. So one is congratulations. I think I just sold your book to the Met, and I don't know, maybe I told you that already, but like it's in the Met's collection, so that's great. Yeah. And I wanted to ask, like, when did you make your first photograph?
I wish I had like a cool answer. I really don't. I genuinely don't think I remember, but I like don't have a memory of anything really existing before it. Like I was lucky enough that I fell into it at a very young age, like probably 9 or 10, that I started
That's
regularly photographing. Yeah. And I was brought up in a weird time where I'm 25, by the way, where I was brought up in a weird time where it was post analog but pre-digital, so it was this weird space of like kind of shitty point and shoot cameras was sort of the standard for it. So none of the images really exist anymore, except for one that was like published in this like teen Jewish magazine, which is like weird foreshadowing of like but other than that, a lot of them don't exist anymore, which is honestly probably for the better. I
want to see those hard drives, man. That's crazy.
It's really like pictures of flowers, like nothing special.
No, and that's how it goes. You got to learn somehow, right? You can't just like, you know, we learn as we go. And it's funny that you started so young. I mean, I didn't get to photography until I was like 15 or 16, but to have a camera at 10 is a whole different experience. Growing up with a camera is what that is. And were your parents just into art? Like, how did that work? Like, how did you find a camera in the first place?
They weren't at all. They're the kind of, they have art in their house, but it's like art from Home Goods, you know, like, and there's no interest really. Like they're very normal, like you know, 9 to 5 type of people. And I'm not talking shit. I really do like my parents for the most part. But
you know, you love that Home Goods art. My parents, sorry, to just interrupt for a moment, my parents definitely love the TJ Maxx and the Home Goods shit. So it's like, I definitely would go home and like, oh, you bought another 70 by 80 inch mirror that's golden around the edges. And, you know, you could pick it up with like just your, like, it's like 17 pounds or so. It's not even, anyway, I now have one of those in my apartment because they bought too many. Anyway, so yes, I got the home Goods art. I get it. Okay.
Totally. That's what their house looks like. It's very not it honestly, when I was going through the classic phase of once I moved out and was doing my undergrad and came home and noticed it was very suburban and cool, I was definitely making a lot of images of that kind of art. But now that I don't know, it's a little it's very comforting to go into a house like that. Even other people's parents' houses that have like the mass produced art, I'm like, that's kind of comforting.
Yeah.
But I can't even remember really getting a first camera because I think I was just stealing other people's. Like my grandparents had a tiny point and shoot, and I would just take it from them for weeks at a time until I finally got my own, which I immediately lost. And then they didn't get me another one for a while. And then once, I think when I was in high school was when I got an actual DSLR with a detachable lens, and then I really never focused on anything else ever again. No pun intended.
Oh, good. You still got out of high school, so congratulations for that. Okay, and then so where'd you go to undergrad? Because you went to your master's in Virginia, but was undergrad in photography as well?
Yeah, I went to a very small art school called Point Park University in Pittsburgh, which is
Okay.
honestly a hidden gem. I loved it so much. It was very tiny. I was also a competitive dancer growing up, and it was a really good and it was a really good dance school, so that's why I knew the name. But other than that, it's like very much kind of an off the map school. But it was so outdated that their entire program was all film. And it wasn't like we're doing all film and like a cool, we love photography and we're sticking with it way. It was like we don't have the budget type of way. And it ended up being so beneficial. That's not a knock on them. I love my undergrad experience, but like they had a fully functioning color darkroom. Like so I learned how to do like all of that and learned how to do large format. And it really, it's a weird like education to be doing these like images on these like tiny point and shoot cameras and then go to college and do the whole darkroom experience and then go back to digital like I'm doing now. But that's how it all
seems like normal. That seems like the normal process. I mean, same deal. I was in college and learned in a darkroom, black and white darkroom, and a color darkroom, and then both of those things. Well, the color darkroom definitely ceased to exist about 2 years after I got out of school. And yeah, I get that. Cool. So Point Park. Were you also dancing in college, or was that just like?
No, I gave it up. I really wasn't that good. I was like the worst person on the best team. Like we were very hard. It was very hardcore. Like it was very dance moms. Like we competed in the same competitions as dance moms, like multiple times. I don't
know what that means, but okay.
You've never heard of dance moms?
I'm sorry, I do not know what you're talking about.
It's a reality show and it's a great binge. It's just toxic mom culture, making their 5-year-olds do like all of these dances and wear full faces of makeup. But that was the world I grew up in. But I was always just like good. Like I knew it wasn't like a career or anything. It was just like it was the equivalent of like a sport.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. And at that school, did you have you ever do you have a mentor in photography, or has there been somebody like guiding you through a little bit of this process?
I think a lot of my education in a formal sense, both of the schools had really important characters that played mentorship roles. At Point Park University, April Fridges, who's the head of the program there, is an amazing person. And she came in my sophomore year, and it was a very lax school beforehand. And she came in and was like, no, this is a very intense program now. Nice. And we all hated her for
Good. Okay. Well, you're completely.
And then during Justin James Reed, who's I'm frozen.
No, you're good now. It was momentary lapse, but now we're back to. You said Justin James Reed. Yes, he makes some great work.
Yeah. Yes, he's the interim chair at VCU for the photo film department, and he really the second I moved to Richmond, I just for some reason clicked with him really well, and just would call him about every freak out, which in grad school was many. So he definitely served as a wonderful mentor there. And I think I don't know what's gonna happen now that I'm an adult and have to actively sort of find those types of relationships, but I think it'll just happen.
Well, you just keep the relationships you have and you grow more. I mean, that's how we all do it, I think. I mean, we all have to have the people we kind of bounce ideas off of all the time. I mean, we have to do that. There's no other way to get through this painful art situation that we've put ourselves in unless we have our peoples, Totally. I wanted to, Molly asked the question, how have you seen your relationship with your mother as a subject changed over the years?
Mhm. It changes as, I mean, I started when I was 19. And the difference between a 19-year-old and a 25-year-old is so immense. And I think the work really shows that. Some of the early images are just so angsty and so angry. Not that we don't go through phases where we're like habitually angry at each other, and it definitely shows photographically, even like in the last year of making the work. But I think there was a lot more angst going on when I was 19. And a lot of these images now are less reactionary and more exploratory, I guess. And also, there's been a big shift in the first maybe year or two. She was kind of just wondering what I was up to and didn't really get it. And I remember we got in a really big fight. There's an image of her where she is only wearing underwear and she's standing on a scale. And she really liked it at the time, but me posting it on the internet was not okay. And then she was getting upset that it was getting like good attention from publications and whatnot. And then the difference between that, which I think was 2016, maybe it was even earlier. It was like 2015 or something. But and now where I come home and she's like, "When are we shooting?" Or she'll be like,
that's
"The light,
nice.
the light
That's
at
cool.
8:30 in the kitchen is really great." She is much more of an active participant now. It's definitely become more of a staple in the way that we share our time, especially because I come home I'll come home 6 times a year, or even like living with her the last 6 months. We'll like make a plan to be like, okay, yeah, Saturday, we know we have the advantage of having lived in the same house for my entire life. So I know where the light hits at certain times. Like the house doesn't change much.
You're
so it's
ready.
kind of an endless stage for us
Yeah.
to kind of play with. Exactly.
Yeah, you
And
know
so
your
that's been
sunny
really
days.
nice.
That's nice.
It's so true. And she knows it now too, which is really interesting because I don't think it's something she really ever thought about before. But now she'll like look at the weather app and be like, it's gonna rain on Saturday. We should try to do this like Tuesday.
What a perfect
that's
collaborator. I mean, that's wonderful to hear. I
Yeah.
hope that she like listens to this call and like feels all the love that you give her.
I think she hates the attention.
Yeah, she does not hate the attention. She's asking to be in this photograph, so she wants the attention. I mean, I have friends that photograph their family a lot, and they always fight it a bit, but they freaking love it. So yeah, keep doing that. The next question we have, adding to this question, was it hard to convince your mother to participate in your art? Which I guess you kind of answered. How does she feel about being in it, and do you show those images to her? What is the reaction to them? So I guess you kind of answered all those things already. The next question is, when you photograph objects owned by people who've passed away, are there any considerations you take or thoughts that go through your mind?
That's a good question. I guess it depends on the context really, because a lot of the objects in Judaica I'm working with are either mine or they're the persons that are being photographed. It's an heirloom of theirs. I don't think I necessarily I'm definitely not going to thrift stores and being like, oh cool, a menorah, let me go use it. It's already an internal part of the home. Though I don't know if necessarily I would be always opposed. If I find myself tomorrow inspired and I happen to see something in a thrift store or something to photograph, I guess I'm not entirely opposed, because it's not like it's being taken out of its context really. It's still a ritual object. It's still Judaica. If we are talking specifically about objects.
And you're also, you're also putting them into a different perspective anyway. It's not like they exist in that person's home anymore when they're in your photograph. It becomes a different space. Like, we don't know that person. It's not about their home anymore. It's about your photograph. So
because that also kind of applies to like places too. Like in this book, there's an image in a mikveh, and a mikveh is a ritual bath that traditionally Orthodox married Jewish women use monthly after their period as sort of a ritual cleansing, which is that's a loaded sentence. Like, there's so much you can unpack there, but some people think it's incredibly archaic and sexist, and some women find this to be like this central, very private act, but a very central part of their Jewish identity. Usually, like, they're very hidden. Like, even the buildings themselves. Like, if you pass like a JCC or something, it's probably attached to it, and you've never seen it or noticed it before, and that's intentional. So by photographing that and putting it book in such a public forum, that's already it's met with some feedback. There were some arguments with some rabbis during this process. But ultimately, I love to argue with rabbis. But ultimately, I think that the interpretation of the object or the place itself is as important to kind of argue and study as the actual action itself. And I mean, arguing in a sense is a very Jewish thing anyway. So even if they are arguing with me, I think that interpretation of how something is being used is very Jewish, honestly. So I've made my peace with what I've included and what I've not included. But also the participants are fully consenting and fully aware of the context that, someone immersing in a mikveh and me photographing them is super aware that I'm there, that we've talked about it for hours before. We've talked about the object, or we've talked about the space and how it was going to be used. I send them images before anything gets shared to anyone else. So I think it's very participatory on both ends.
And okay, another question. I mean, the questions that are coming in are awesome. Thank you so much, y'all. We're going to open it up so everybody gets their face on screen in a moment. But one more question before we do that. How does your installation/performance work connect with your photographic work, and how did it evolve over time? Mm-hmm. Or the tiny amount of years that you've existed making photographs. I mean, I can't even believe that you're only 25 years old. It's making me feel like I am it's just I don't. Anyway, please.
Well, don't hold it against me.
No, of course not.
But I do think I come and go in waves with performance, because they're, like I've been saying, I guess the thesis of this artist talk seems to be that photography is the center and everything else is kind of revolving around it. And I think performance art for me functions in that very similar space, where they have a lot of things in common that I think photographically and performance wise are really interesting. I don't think photos are truth ever. I think it's always a performance, and it is always a truth, but it's always a performance of sorts. It's a performance of the photographer seeing a certain way, or the subject being a certain way. And that exists even when the camera is not there, especially thinking about femininity and performing womanhood and performing archetypal, I guess, feminine aspects, which is a lot of what my performance work details or explores. I think it exists in the same way, whether or not there's a camera there or not. So some projects that were performance eventually ended up being a photograph, and I liked them better that way, or vice versa, where I tried to photograph something and ended up performing it and being like, okay, that did what it needed to do for me. But there's definitely a lot of overlap. Okay.
And okay, cool. So if everyone would turn on their cameras while I ask the next question, and we can have this grow a little bit. The next question comes from Reba, or Reba. I'm guessing it's Reba because that makes way more sense to me. Reba asks, I'm currently in the midst of applying to grad programs and extremely nervous, which thank you for giving, thanks for letting us, feel your nervousness. Seeing you produce a series like Kavana makes me excited, but also I wonder if I could ever produce something as beautiful or meaningful while in grad school. Did you ever feel the same? And is there any advice you would give your past self if you could go back in time and say what would you tell yourself 3 years ago?
I think you should ask someone 5 years out of grad school, honestly. But I will say, as someone fresh out of grad school, the only thing I would recommend, just on a logistical note, don't pay for it. Get funding, get a stipend. Because it's a full-time job. I can't have imagined it. I mean, and it's an immense privilege. It is a privilege to be able to set aside 2 years of your life, move somewhere random, not pay for it, and then be able to travel and make work and really put in the time and effort that it, I think, requires to make a really meaningful body of work in 2 years. I think it's a full-time job, and especially if it's a grad program where you're teaching, I think that you should be compensated for the labor of teaching and also making work that makes the school grow in a certain way. But I think once you're in a program, the whole focus is to cultivate meaningful work. And even if you make I think something that my grad school mentor, Justin James Reed, told me that I really identify with is that if you make 12 images a year, you're in really good shape. 12 really good, strong images a year that you think add to something. Because, you know, I had crit once a month, and I would probably share between 3 and 8 images, like new images in the last month. But so many of them fell away very quickly or didn't have the staying power. And that's fine. Like it's kind of like having to kill your babies. Like if you have 12 images throughout the year that you think are really strong, at the end of a 2-year grad program or 3-year grad program, depending on where you go, you're going to have a really good body of work.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, if you can make like 5 to 8 good photographs that are actually memorable or people actually really feel in a year, I'd be very happy with that. Like super happy with that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I did not feel that way before grad school. I think that's the biggest thing that changed about my practice, is that before grad school, I would post things like right away, like post things like the week I made them, and also try to shoot like almost every day and like try to keep up this like repertoire where they didn't mean as much. But now if I'm making, you know, one thing a week, but thinking about it all week or trying to organize with someone that whole time, and it works a little bit slower, the patience shows photographically, I think.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, slowing down and you definitely should not be posting your new images right away. You got to give it a good amount of time before you let those things out into the world, just because I know that I've posted things and then 3 weeks later, I'm like, that is terrible. It's a terrible photograph. But you know, that happens. You have to give it some time, I think. But if anybody else has questions, let's ask them in person instead of in the text, because I don't want to read anymore. And if you ask the questions, I can start eating this taco that I have right next to me. And that's important to me right now. So if you have any questions for Hannah, please ask. Unmute yourself and ask.
I'll go first. Hi, my name is Adrian. My question for Hannah is, when you were working on this project, I know you said it was going to be your thesis. Also from the start that you wanted it to be a book. So I'm curious about like when a body of work, its final kind of home is in a book. I'm always curious whether people knew from the outset that it would be a book and were already thinking in book form, or was it only later that you figured out that the best way to share it was a book?
Right. I think it really depends on the project and depends on your installation aspirations for the work. Like I had the opportunity to be able to see this work at Blue Sky as a solo exhibition, and I really liked it, and I thought it looked really cohesive, and I liked that they were all kind of smaller sizes, like they're all between 15 by 20 and 20 by 25 at their biggest. So they're small enough that they exist kind of intimately, but post January, once I got them back, thinking about that intimacy in terms of actually holding a book and in terms of, you know, being able to really, I think photography is closer to literature than it is anything else, like any other medium. Just because I think it, especially now, like our visual literacy is probably on par to our actual like reading words literacy. We consume images all day, every day. So they have to be intentionally placed in order to have that impact. And I really like that. Like I mostly, whenever people ask like what my inspirations are and stuff for artists, I'm always like, but when people are asking me what I'm reading, I can list things. Like that's really where I go first, is to read short stories and read fiction, because I think photography has a really direct relationship to reading and to being literate. And I think that's why I've been drawn to books. And this is the first book that I've made in like a fully realized type of form. And now seeing it in this way, now my brain is very fixated on like, yes, I can definitely do this for like every project now that I can really see what that end goal could be. Like it could be an exhibition and they should still be, you know, like well-made images that can be blown up and function as an individual object. But to be able to switch your brain into thinking like, no, this image can also, while it can be beautiful on its own, has a relationship to other images that can all be held in a hand, you know, and have a very quiet, intimate relationship with the viewer. I think that's been an effective mode of making work since I've seen this book in like the last 6 months.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, we used to have at Blue Sky, there was a group of women writers who used to come to all of our artist talks, and they just loved it. They said, oh, this is so great. We come away so full of ideas and energy from looking at this photography.
Yeah, definitely.
Sort of following up on the book, can you talk a little bit more about the design, sort of, and how you and Kris work together, sequencing, sort of the decisions about how to sort of face blank pages and images, etc.
Yeah, and Kris, feel free to jump in wherever you want here. But it was definitely a lot of back and forth. I sent images I wanted to be included. He sent, let's add these and get rid of these. I sent, what about this order? He sent, what about this order? And it was just kind of a back and forth, and like literally an email chain with like 100 emails in them. And
Yeah.
and I think it was just kind of like a slow back and forth. But I know that in terms of photo editing, I think some of these images are like louder than other images. Like some of them kind of deserve a page on their own, or they deserve to be spaced out. Like I think I don't really know how to like verbalize other than like the candle hands, the cover image feels really loud to me. But some of them feel much more quiet, so they can exist in the same space on the same pages, or they can exist to have maybe 4 or 5 or 6 kind of quiet ones in a row, and then there's another loud kind of more statement making image. And that's kind of how I was thinking about sequencing, but I know Kris was also thinking about other kinds of sequencing.
I think on my end, I always think about like we truly have to fit all of these photographs into 21 spreads, right? I mean, the book is 48 pages, and that means there's 24 spread. Well, actually, it means there's 22 spreads. So, and you have to have text. So really, we're working with 20 spreads of image making. So we have to be careful not to. I don't like overloading the books we make. I don't want picture left and right on every single page. I think that's pretty. I just don't like that. I mean, sometimes it works if the project's about that, but for this project, it was like we have probably 40 images that we were working with, and we wanted to get it down to a certain like 25 to 30 image range to fit into this book properly. And then we just had to sit down together and say, like, what is important for people to see? What will people care about maybe 10 years from now? You know, like I think for making books, it's like not about now. The exhibition could be a little bit different because it's now and it ends. But the book has to keep being decent for like a long time as photography changes, as we change, as the world changes. So for when I make a book, I'm always thinking like which images will stand the test of time. Those need to be definites. And which images will definitely like be on walls, those get individual single pages mostly. And then we try to split those up into a book so that I make books like albums and batting orders pretty much. Like, so, you know, you get in there with a groovy like first 2 or 3 tracks, and then you're hitting like major hitters, and then you get your like cleanup guys, and you get a little bit lower in the lineup. Like we're kind of working with ideas more than just like giving you this like beautiful like kind of amazing one image. We're working with some ideas, and then we get back to a place where we're just hitting you with more and more and more of what we think is like things you need to. I don't know. That's how I kind of figure it. I mean, it's probably not the right way to make books, but it's the only way I know how. So like and I'm glad that people want to work with me on like in this way. So that's how I consider it. But that's not a really good answer for your question, actually. I mean, it's way looser than it should be, probably. I mean, I do not have like, there's no the education of the bookmaking is about like having looked at other books beforehand and seeing like what worked, what didn't to me. So it's all really personal. And then I talk to Hannah and figure out what works for her. And then we like make a book that is collaborative in that way. And every artist is different. I mean, like, yeah, there may be images. I know that there's 2 or 3 images that I thought would really work in the book, but I don't think Hannah was feeling those, so they just are not in the book. And there's images that Hannah probably wanted in the book that I was like, well, maybe that's just not it just doesn't fit in this project in this way. So it's a give and take, and I think it's totally collaborative. I would have to say, and I'm hoping that it was collaborative enough for you, Hannah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That was a good answer.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think it's a good back and forth, and I think that especially because I had a bunch of little prints anyway of this whole project printed out, it was easier to move things around and start to be like, oh, I really want these 2 next to each other. Like in the book, these make the most sense to be next to each other, whereas other ones he could have made those calls. So it definitely is like a give and take.
Awesome. If anybody
Yeah, I
else has
give that as a
questions,
piece of advice to anybody who's making a book. Make sure you have a set of little prints.
oh yeah, for sure. If you have
And
like the
to be able to look at things, computers are good for looking at things one at a time, but little prints are really necessary.
even
Particularly with
like
a book where you want to kind of lay out a river from the first spread to the second to the third to the fourth.
yeah,
And
I would
look at
say
the overall shape of movement of images through the book and the particular pairings.
I would add that yeah, if you have like a little 4x5 inch print of everything you want to put in the book, even the things that you don't think will work, just print out the whole project, put it on a floor or a huge table, and move those images around until you start to like edit out things or figure out like, oh, these two work so well together that they have to be across from on the page. You know, like that, you'll see it immediately when you put it on that table, but computer screens can't do that. I mean, it's just not the same. And you can work with Bridge or Lightroom or moving things around on a Mac like folder, but like it never works as well as just putting it on paper. And it doesn't even have to be good prints. You know what your prints look like, so it's not like you can laser print them. You can get 4x6s from like Walmart. I don't know, like anything. Just put them, like lay them out on a table and figure out your stuff.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh yeah, Kris has the deep selection. I know that this is like only like 50 of his prints, and I know that he has like 20,000 in the house or something like that.
One quick question
is actually laying out the touch catalog.
Where's the best place for us to buy the book? So where's the
there's
best
only
place
one
to do
place,
ordering? Okay.
No, there's a few places where you can buy the book. You can find the book at Photo Eye, which is, you know, a huge photography site. They exist in person at Print It Matters location in New York City. 2 locations in New York have the books, and on the kgpnyc.com website is my website. So
we can order it from you.
Absolutely.
Online.
It's $24. We keep everything affordable. They're all limited edition. I think we got 400 of these made, and we probably have half left at this point. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
They'll be on tables soon enough. You know, like once we can get back in person, we'll have them on our tables in New York and LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Amsterdam, London, Paris. We'll be everywhere we can once we can get this book back on the table.
I'll also say if they're not sold out, there's a special edition that comes with a print that's pretty darn affordable too. So
not sold out yet. Yeah.
Go for it.
And those special editions are limited there's 2 prints limited to 12 each, and they're $150, I think. Yeah, and that comes with the book. The prints are signed, the book is not. So if you want your book signed, you have to mail it to Hannah, and then she'll mail it back to you with a self-addressed, or SASE as they call it, and that's how you can get your book signed.
Yeah. Or find me in rural Rhode Island.
Yeah, just drive to Rhode Island, wherever you are. Just drive to Rhode Island, she'll sign your book for you. Right on the beach, you can chill with her on the beach. But I think we now have we're an hour in, so one more question and then we're out. If you guys have anything else. Or nothing. So thank you very much for being here. Blue Sky, thanks for having us. I really love having these conversations with the artists, and I really appreciate the support. I'm so glad that Hannah got to show out there, and I wish I was able to see it, but hopefully she applies again in some years when she has the new project and we can get to show her again. And, you know, like keep, support Blue Sky. We definitely need your support. I mean, it's been a tough year for all nonprofits, but we strive to keep bringing you art that is like dope. I mean, that's it. Like I think we're doing some of the best work in the photography game, and that's just what we do all the time. So like, please support our efforts as much as possible. And thanks for being here with us. Really, I mean, the Tuesday night is, you know, after the election, it's hard. Like, thanks for giving us an hour. Really, I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, you guys.
And thanks for asking all the really awesome questions, because I had a list of questions and we got to 0 of them. So thanks for asking your questions. But peace, y'all. Enjoy the night. I'm glad this is recorded. This is going online, so you can, if you ever want to listen to me and Hannah talk again, you can hear it. I wouldn't listen to it because I'm just not going to listen to myself. But anyhow, and if you guys, yeah, just let us know. We both have email addresses and we're both friendly people. So if you have any questions, please let us know.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
thanks so much for
Thank
being
you.
here. Peace, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, y'all.
Thank you so much.
I'm gonna eat these tacos. Huh?
Mwah.
Great.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, peace, y'all.
See you soon.